If you're a couple that is planning to retire before age 65, then there's one critical move you need to make with your retirement income strategy. Because if you miss it, you'll end up paying thousands in extra taxes. So in this video, I want to walk you through the mistake many couples make when retiring early, and more importantly, how to plan ahead so you don't fall into the same trap. Before we jump into the content, if you haven't already checked out our podcast, Retirement Unpacked, make sure to check that out. We have a new one that launches every single Saturday, 6 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So join us there. Our team at Parallel Wealth just has an open conversation. We're answering your questions and just talking about retirement, different strategies, tips, tricks, all of it. So make sure to join us every Saturday morning for that. So for most couples, when they retire before age 65, sure, you could have a defined benefit pension plan, but fewer couples have those nowadays. Most people are relying on their RRSP. So when they hit retirement, they're drawing down their RRSP. Convert to a RIF, start drawing it down. The problem is, a lot of times we see it's very driven by one spouse or the other, meaning that most of the taxable income falls into one hand versus being split into two. And seeing that we're in Canada, we live in a progressive tax system, meaning that if you make a little bit of money, you pay a little bit of tax. But as you make more money, you pay a higher percentage of tax. So if a household has $100,000 of income and it's all in one person's hands, you're paying a lot more tax than if you were to split that 50-50. Now, the problem retiring before age 65, it's really hard to split that income unless you plan properly, which is what this video is about and what I'm going to show you in our software here in a minute. So as you build up to retirement and start saving money, you might be in your 30s, 40s watching this video saying, this might be me in 20 years. Well, it might be, but don't let you fall into this trap in that if you might plan to retire before age 65, maybe you plan to 65, but hey, maybe the opportunity comes that you can retire at 60. If you're married or common law and you start building up assets, you need to make sure that you build them out in a way that when you draw them out, especially from age of retirement until age 65, that the draw out is as equal as possible. And here's how you do that. So here we have Jim and Pam Halpert. You can see Jim has been the one that's been working. And so he's built up a nice RSP worth $1 million, also has a TFSA worth $100,000. Pam, on the other hand, she stayed at home with the kids. She raised the kids. She didn't work. She didn't save up any RSP, but she was able to save up about $100,000 in TFSA. So combined, they have $1 million RSP, $200,000 in the TFSA, but all of the RSP is in Jim's name. So if we go to their overall plan, so we'll see here, when they hit retirement, they have a very nice income, $90,000 throughout their lifetime. Later on, they drop to 80 and then 55. So that go, slow go, no go stage is in force. And you can see they're both 60 years old here in 2026 when they retire. Now, they have their income need, not a problem. They have that 90, 80, 55. It's all there for them, ready to go. But you can see their RIF withdrawal is there, but the total tax they're paying, you can see for the first 5 years from age 60 to 65 is quite high, $10,000 to $12,000. As soon as they hit age 65, it drops to $4,700. Now, because all of that RSP is in Jim's name, you can see he's pulling out a lot of money. Now, at 65, so does CPP and old age security. And we can also see there's a bit of pension splitting. And that's where the benefit lies. So only at age 65 onward can we actually income split Jim's RSP or RIF income with Pam. Prior to age 65, it's all taxed in Jim's hands. And that's where that tax bill jumps up. It goes from $10,000 to $12,000 a year as a household down to $4,000 or $5,000. That $5,000 to $7,000 every year that they're paying in extra taxes, well, that could have been an extra trip. But they don't have that extra trip because they didn't plan properly. So what would happen as they built up their assets if they kind of saw a big picture of saying, well, all my money isn't going into my RSP. I'm going to start making contributions to Pam in a spousal RSP. It's still my tax break, Jim would say, but we're building up Pam's account. Thus, when we retire at 60, she has some RSPs that she can draw down and actually be taxable in her hands, mainly for those first 5 years. Again, if they retired at 55 or 50, they have a lot more years that she would need to draw down on. So again, plan accordingly. But let's take a look at the difference on just a small change of moving $200,000 into a spousal RSP. So we can see here now Jim has $800,000 in his RSP versus the $1 million previous, and Pam now has a spousal RSP worth $200,000. So when we go into the accounts here, you can see within Pam's account, she has that spousal RSP, we're able to draw that down and generate some taxable income. Now, I want to go back to that combined tax bill. Again, before $10,000 to $12,000, now we're paying about 8, 9, everything's under $10,000. So a lot of money in taxes saved. Now you can see at 65, we do have a drop in taxes payable, and that's primarily due to age and other credits and benefits that you get at age 65. But that pre-amount, 60 to 65, is a massive difference, and we've been able to level out that tax bill. Again, if they were to retire earlier than 60, there'd be that much bigger of a difference. So you want to start building up assets for everyone in that household that's going to be part of retirement and drawing down. Don't have it sitting all in one person's account. Now, here's a huge caveat to this. You might see, well, we built up that spousal RSP for Pam, but at the end of the day, there's one thing that you have to keep in mind with the spousal RSP, which is attribution rules. Now, what attribution rules mean is the money that was put into the spousal RSP was technically Jim's money, and Jim got the tax break. Now, if Pam was to take out that money in the first 3 years, since there was money deposited, it would be taxed in Jim's hands and not Pam's. So as you build up something like this, you have to remember, make sure to leave 3 years. So it's the current year plus 2 more years is the attribution rule. So right now, as I record this, it's 2025. So if I was to put money into a spousal RSP for my wife, if I didn't touch the money for 2025, 26, 27, that means 2028, I could pull out the money and it would be taxed in my wife's hands. If I pulled any money out in 2025, 2026, or 2027. So in this year or the next 2 years, it would actually be taxed back into my hands, which would defeat this whole purpose. And that's why it's important to plan ahead. Now, again, there's one other caveat to this, and of course, there's always these little sidebars, but you are able to pull out the minimum amount. So if you convert your RSP to a RIF, the minimum amount that you pull out, there's no income attribution on that minimum amount. So that is one benefit. But again, try not to take advantage of that. Plan ahead far enough that when time comes to retire, you've built up a spousal RSP and that 3-year attribution has already long passed. So your spouse or partner can pull that money out, it's taxed in their hands and not your hands. And that's a huge tax benefit. So while you may not be planning to retire before 65, you never know. Life changes. Maybe a health issue comes up and you're like, you know what? I'm retiring earlier. I'm not doing this. I'm not wasting my life. That could be it. Maybe you get an inheritance. But there's so many factors that could come into it. We see it all the time of, yeah, I never planned to retire this early, but things just worked out well, or my investments did well, or my income was much higher than I expected. And so as you build up to retirement, for me, I have a spousal RSP for my wife, and we're many years from retirement. But I want to start building that out to equalize it, to make sure as we walk into retirement, if we have the ability to retire early, that our assets are structured in a way where we're paying as little tax as possible. And too often we have clients come in our door, it's husband and wife, and one of them worked their whole life and saved up this whack load of money. The other person didn't work, they're at home with the kids not working, and they have nothing. And they're 58 years old and they have 7 years of paying way more tax than they should be if they had planned properly. So again, I put videos out like this to make sure that you plan ahead, that you understand the impact and why spousal. A lot of people say, well, spousal RSPs, they're not helpful. Well, they really can be in some situations. Again, if you're both working, both saving up RSPs, perfect. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you have to build up that spousal to equalize the taxable income in those first few years of retirement before you can start income splitting. So hopefully this saves a few people some taxes as they retire early. We'll see you in the next video.